NASA has recently highlighted that now is the ideal time to refocus on Venus, especially following new revelations suggesting the possibility of life on the planet. Looking back at NASA's records from the 1960s, Venus was often referred to as a planet from hell, while Mars became the prime target for exploration. This careful labeling of planets was not incidental. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union had a major focus on Venus, despite the planet offering little hope for life. It wasn't until the fall of the Soviet Union that the Venera program, which had operated from 1961 to 1983, was decommissioned. Thanks to figures like Neil deGrasse Tyson, we now have insights into why Venus was so central to Soviet space exploration. The collapse of the Soviet Union not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but also led to the loss of many secrets tied to the former superpower space endeavors. Before the United States dominated planetary exploration, the Soviets were at the forefront of space exploration. While the US focused on the moon missions, the Soviet Union was deeply invested in exploring Venus. Their Venus program, called Venera, ran for over 2 decades and sent out 28 expensive missions to the planet. Out of these, 13 entered Venus's atmosphere, and 8 successfully landed, achieving remarkable firsts for space exploration. The Soviet Union's interest in Venus raises questions. Was the goal to use Venus as a potential military outpost, or were they exploring the planet for signs of life? The truth is hard to discern, as the Soviet space program operated with a high level of secrecy, especially during the Cold War. Much of what we know about the Venera missions comes from declassified documents and archived materials. Despite numerous missions, the Soviets were the first to send probes into the atmosphere of a planet other than Earth, and they also made the first successful soft landing on another planet. They were the first to send back images and sounds from the surface of Venus, long before the US achieved similar milestones. The secrecy surrounding the Soviet space program and their achievements on Venus are less well known, possibly because much of their historical documentation was lost or destroyed after the USSR dissolved in 1992. This loss of information has led to many unanswered questions about the true motivations behind the Soviets' Venus exploration efforts. One plausible reason for the focus on Venus, rather than Mars, could have been cost-effectiveness. Venus is much closer to Earth, approximately 40 million kilometers away, while Mars is about 250 million kilometers distant. This proximity made Venus a more practical target for space missions, especially when resources were limited. Despite Venus's harsh conditions, such as temperatures that can melt lead and its thick, crushing atmosphere, the Soviet Union's space program pursued missions there, believing that the planet still held scientific value. Even though modern scientists generally agree that Venus is unlikely to support life, the exploration of the planet was still critical in advancing our understanding of space. Without these early missions, it would have been nearly impossible to gain insight into Venus's extreme conditions. Today, many scientists look back at the Soviet Venus missions with a sense of awe, recognizing the pivotal role they played in the space race. While the United States focused on Mars and other missions, the Soviet Union's commitment to Venus was not just a demonstration of scientific curiosity but also a strategic move to outpace the US in space exploration. Ultimately, the exploration of Venus is a significant chapter in the history of space exploration, and the Soviets' achievements in this area remain an important, though often overlooked, part of that legacy. The Venera program, initiated by the Soviet Union, marked a pivotal chapter in space exploration, particularly with its study of Venus, a planet long believed to be hostile to life. The mission's complexity required advanced instrumentation capable of gathering high-level data and evidence. The first spacecraft, Venera 4, was launched successfully, entering Venus's atmosphere and gathering crucial information about the planet's surface. Building on that success, the Soviets sent Venera 5, not just a repeat of the first mission, but a spacecraft designed to collect more specific data, focusing on Venus's extreme temperatures, atmospheric pressure, and radiation levels. By the mid-1970s, the Soviet Union's space program reached its most refined phase. The Venera missions had transitioned from technological experiments to full-scale exploratory endeavors. The most significant success during this period was Venera 7, which, in 1970, became the first spacecraft to transmit data from the surface of another planet. This mission provided essential insights into Venus's scorching temperatures, dense atmosphere, and high surface pressure. The Soviets also managed to record the first sounds from Venus, offering a unique glimpse into the planet's environment. In the 1980s, the program achieved further milestones with Venera 13, which set new records for interplanetary exploration, capturing the first color photographs of Venus's surface. Around the same time, Venera 14 was launched to gather similar data. These missions marked a peak in the Soviet Union's efforts to understand Venus, contributing substantially to global knowledge of the planet. Despite the end of the Soviet Union, Russia has continued to pursue Venus exploration. The Venera D mission, a joint project between Russia's Roscosmos and NASA, is planned for launch in the late 2020s or early 2030s. It aims to further investigate Venus's atmosphere, surface, and geological history, with a focus on determining the planet's potential for past or present habitability. The mission will include an orbiter, a lander, and possibly an inflatable probe to study the planet's climate in detail. The legacy of the Venera missions extends far beyond their scientific achievements. They represent a pinnacle of human innovation during the Cold War, as the Soviet Union sought to demonstrate its technological superiority in the space race. These missions also marked a breakthrough in the use of robotic probes for planetary exploration, laying the groundwork for future interplanetary missions. The technological advancements such as heat-resistant materials, robust communication systems, and reliable landing techniques, developed through Venera, have had a lasting impact on space exploration, influencing missions to Mars and beyond. The scientific data obtained from Venera provided invaluable insights into Venus's extreme conditions, including its high temperatures, crushing atmospheric pressure, and toxic atmosphere dominated by carbon dioxide. The Venera spacecraft also captured the first images of Venus's surface, revealing a rocky landscape marked by volcanic features, which provided geologists with key insights into the planet's geological history. While the Venera program saw remarkable successes, it was not without its challenges. Many missions either failed to reach Venus or encountered technical problems that prevented them from transmitting data. The harsh conditions on Venus, temperatures exceeding 450 degrees Celsius (842 degrees Fahrenheit) and corrosive sulfuric acid clouds, posed enormous engineering challenges for spacecraft design and operation. Yet, the resilience and determination of Soviet scientists and engineers allowed the program to continue, ultimately paving the way for future missions to Venus and other celestial bodies. The legacy of the Venera program is evident in the ongoing exploration of Venus by space agencies around the world. NASA's upcoming Venus mission, in collaboration with Roscosmos, will build on the successes of the Venera missions by deploying advanced instruments to study Venus's atmosphere, surface features, and potential for past or present life. The mission represents a joint effort to unravel the remaining mysteries of Venus, our closest planetary neighbor, and to expand humanity's understanding of the conditions that might support life beyond Earth. At the time the Soviet program launched Sputnik 1 in 1957, marking the start of the space race, America wasn't yet a major player in the space exploration scene. This event escalated the competition to assert dominance in space, with the United States aiming to keep up with the Soviet Union. Interestingly, despite this competition, the U.S. initially focused its efforts on the Moon rather than Venus. In the 1960s, NASA faced a string of setbacks with its Venus missions, leading to what became known as the Venus Curse. Every attempt to launch a spacecraft to explore Venus ended in failure, which opened the door for the Soviets to capitalize on America's struggles. Both the US and the USSR were deeply invested in the space race, and while the Soviet Union set its sights on Venus, the US had already made its mark by landing on the Moon. The Soviets, determined to demonstrate superiority, invested heavily in Venus missions. This focused strategy allowed them to gain an edge over the Americans in this specific aspect of space exploration. As a result, the Soviet space program repeatedly launched successful missions to Venus, with the goal of proving their supremacy. In the face of repeated failures, the U.S. Space Agency turned to media and propaganda to downplay the Soviet achievements, branding Venus as a hellish planet and redirecting the public's attention to Mars as the future destination for human exploration. However, the Soviets remained undeterred, and their Venus program continued to progress, showcasing their technological advancements and space prowess. While the Venus missions were often overlooked in modern space history, they were, in fact, a significant achievement. The Soviet Union's early work on the Venera program, starting in the 1950s, set the stage for interplanetary exploration. The Soviets had the advantage of greater resources in the early years of the Cold War, which allowed them to push ahead with ambitious space exploration goals. The USSR's space program, particularly the Venera missions, was marked by a relentless pursuit of advancement. In 1966, the Soviets achieved a historic milestone with the launch of Venera 3, the first spacecraft to reach the surface of Venus, successfully entering the planet's atmosphere. This success further fueled the rivalry between the superpowers. Meanwhile, the US struggled with a series of failures, which gave the Soviet program a growing lead in space exploration. The Soviet Union's efforts to explore Venus were not without challenges. The limited design capabilities and technical hurdles they faced did not stop them from continuing to innovate. By the 1970s, the USSR launched its largest spacecraft of the Venera program, conducting the first simultaneous launches of Venera 4 and Venera 5. This period marked one of the most exciting and fruitful decades in the history of space exploration. While the US attempted to develop similar missions, it was the Soviet Union that dominated the Venus exploration field during this time.